So many of you have expressed the fear that if you negotiate your salary, they might rescind the offer. So in this episode, I'm speaking with the confident negotiator, John Gates, who's a salary coach and has many years of experience training leaders on how to negotiate compensation packages with confidence. And his training is born out of his extensive experience in corporate recruiting. And with his help, his clients secure 10 to 20% more in their pay packages, even in challenging job markets. Let's dive in. Securing a big salary should be as easy as asking for more, right? Turns out it's a little bit more than that. First, let me ask you, which of these apply to you? Reading org announcements with envy as other people get promoted? Working long hours with little to show for it? Getting more degrees, hoping to be seen? Don't feel bad. I made the same mistake myself without even realizing it. And it's not your fault. In this podcast, I'm going to help you master the strategy and techniques on how to get promoted, how to double your paycheck, and how to secure more flexibility without adding more work or more degrees.
You are listening to Salary Negotiations Made Simple, the show that builds your confidence and inspires you to negotiate for the career you deserve. Do you want to double your salary, secure an ideal career, and increase your confidence to powerfully negotiate every career move? Then you are in exactly the right place.
Hi, John. Thank you so much for being here today. Welcome to the studio.
Thanks, Dorothy. I'm grateful to be here.
Absolutely. Can you get us started with a brief introduction about who you are, what you've done, and what you're doing now?
Sure. So my name is John Gates. I am the founder of the Salary Coach Academy. And what I do is I help salary job seekers, particularly those at the senior and executive levels, to safely negotiate their pay package so that it's optimized with almost zero risk. And that's the big thing, right? Most people that think about negotiating their pay, they shy away from the process because of the perceived risk or the fears. There's high stakes here. So I wanted to create a process that was repeatable, that most people could follow easily enough. It's a skill you can learn. And at the same time, dismiss a lot of the risk that hangs around this topic. So that's a little about me.
Yeah, great. And you have a book, right, John? Do you want to talk about that? Give us a
Sure.
quick about that.
Back here, it's not The Art of War. It's not the poker book, but it's the one in between there. Act Your Wage. And I just published this book in July. The ebook format came out on Amazon. And then just a couple of weeks ago, the softcover hit Amazon. But I brought it forward as a pre-order like a year ago. And I wanted to bring some of the core principles of pay negotiation into the book so that people that maybe couldn't afford a personal coaching plan or something else could still have the secrets accessible. It's a shame that how to negotiate your pay is this somehow it's a big secret, that the wisdom here isn't out there for everyone to find and see easily. So I brought Act Your Wage out for pre-order like a year ago, and the day of pre-order, it hit international bestseller. It's really an amazing story, but I think there's a lot of pent-up interest in this topic.
Yep, absolutely. What are some common fears? You alluded to this a little bit in negotiating. What are the common fears you come across, and what is your recommendation for people to overcome them?
Sure. I think some of the fears, there are some common fears, and then there's a layer down from that. So I think the most common fears are, I'm afraid that if I answer the questions wrong, that I won't advance to the interview process. And pay negotiation does not begin when you get an offer. It starts very early from the very first time they start talking to you about your pay requirement. That's a shot across the bow. And if everybody knows that if you answer that question wrong, you'll be screened out and you won't advance to interviews. So there's this giant temptation to lowball yourself right here, just so that you can have the chance to interview. And in a soft employment market, which is where we are right now, that fear is amplified And it just pushes people into this very conservative place. The other massive fear that people have is that their offer will be rescinded at the finish line. You go through all the interview process, you've talked to dozens of companies. Now you finally got an offer from somebody, and the big fear is if you push it, they're going to take it away from you at the end. And now you have to go back to all of your family and the people that are relying upon you and tell them that it fell apart in the end because you were too aggressive or too assertive or something like that. There's another fear too, and I think that is people perceive negotiation to be a certain thing. They perceive it to be an aggressive thing, a high conflict thing, a big game of chicken where you have to put a number out there and see if the other person blinks. I describe this in my book. It's almost like you think negotiation is you're a gladiator and you're putting on armor and you're drawing a sword and you're marching into an arena, crossing swords with someone and dueling to the death. That's what people think it is. And if you feel that's what it is, and you think, that's not me, you're going to have a tremendous fear about having to pretend to be that. And it's not surprising to me that if people think that's what negotiation is, that they shy away from the process because it's too intimidating. But I can tell you, and you probably know this as well, you can be a very nice person and still get everything that you need out of negotiating. It does not have to be a terrifying, high conflict process. In fact, I think it should be the opposite.
Yeah, absolutely. I usually describe it as a problem-solving exercise to my clients.
I think that's perfect.
Yeah, versus a war to be won or lost. So you mentioned something that really comes up a lot. So I wanted to pull on that thread a little bit, is how do you respond to what is your minimum salary that you're going to expect without losing the chance of moving forward in the process? That is a big fear that comes up.
I know that's a common question because we haven't discussed this already, but I've been a corporate recruiter for 30 years. I was the head of global talent acquisition for multiple Fortune 500 companies. And so through that time, I've been on the other side of that question, asking it for years and years and years. And so I can tell you why that question gets asked, why it's important to answer it in a certain way. So how do you answer that question? What's your salary requirement? First of all, it's a scary question. This is why it's scary, because people think if I give them a number, let's say you respond with 180. 180,000 is what I want. That's my salary requirement, my minimum salary requirement. If it's too high, then you don't get the chance to go forward. And if let's say they were willing to pay 225 and you said 180, now they think they can get you for 180. And you also know somewhere inside that you just left $40,000 on the table, or you're afraid you might do that. So my solution for that is to answer that question with a range and convert it to a total compensation number. So I think also it's a mistake to just say, this is the salary I want. So we'll start there, if that's okay. Every company has a different makeup of compensation structure. Some companies, if you were going to work at a port facility or a private company that doesn't have equity, you're probably going to have most of your pay in cash or in salary. Other companies have a highly leveraged compensation scheme, so they put a lot of pay at risk. You might have a large bonus, a lower salary in that company, but your total pay plan could be much higher in that case. So before you answer that question, what's your salary requirement? I think it's fair to ask them what their budget is for the position and see what they say. And they're probably going to give you a range. And once they respond, then you can say, is that salary only? Or does that include incentives? And it invites them now into a conversation about how their pay plan is structured. And so if they say, for this position, it's probably going to be in the high ones to low twos. Does that include incentives? No, it doesn't. What does the incentive plan look like? That includes annual cash plus an annual equity award. How much is that worth? And Now you're building a picture of what the whole pay plan is worth. So from there, you can boil it down into a total pay package. You can say, okay, so it sounds like the base pay might be high ones to low twos, but the total pay plan might be worth high twos to mid threes. Does that sound about right to you? And so you're zeroing in, and then you say, I'm in an active job search right now. I'm talking with a number of other companies, and the range that I'm discussing with them, total pay, including incentives, is mid twos to mid threes. That's the range that I'm considering. So I would suggest don't answer that question with a number. Answer it with a range. Try to understand what their range is before you come out with yours, if possible. And here's why you want to do it that way. Like, you avoid the chance of lowballing yourself. What you really want is the chance to interview. And then during the interview process, you want to build your value so that you up in your own range. Once you give them a number, they will often think that's what they're going to be able to offer you to get you. They think that's what it's going to be. I know, because I've been on the other side of that. I've trained recruiters on how to have these discussions, hundreds of recruiters. And during my career, I've closed out 75,000 job offers on the other side. So I know what people do wrong. I actually know how to herd candidates through this process. And herding is a harsh word, but it's what we do. We manage the expectations of the candidate. Our biggest fear as recruiters is that at the finish line, after we have tied up the time of executive leaders, very valuable time, the deal falls apart at the end. That's like the worst thing that can happen to a recruiter. You do that more than once and you might not be a recruiter for very long. That's why there's so much pressure on this question from recruiters. It's lower risk for them if they get a number out of you.
In the beginning.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So actually, that's a great segue, because I love that your experience is all about recruiting. Then the question next then is, how can candidates tell how hard they can push without worrying that their offer is going to get rescinded at the job offer time? I would love to get the flip side of, as a recruiter, what is your fear as a recruiter in this process, and how the candidate actually has leverage in it? I'm leading the quiet witness here, but...
Sure. Yeah, that's okay. I think this is a really good question, and I hope we can put some meat on the bones for the listeners here and give them some actual real stuff that they can do and not just fluff.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the questions you asked that was embedded in here is, what is the recruiter afraid of?
Yes.
It's the same thing that the hiring manager is afraid of. And this is something everybody that's going through an offer process needs to understand. If they are making you an offer, they've gone through an offer approval process. That leader that wants to hire you has gone to a series of approvers to say, this is what we want to put on the table. And people have to sign off on that. I think you've been a supply chain executive. Is that right?
Yes.
You've probably had to approve offers for people that worked for you and things like this. So sometimes that process is political. And the hiring manager is dealing with a short-staffed team. They wouldn't be recruiting if they didn't have a hole somewhere that everybody else is filling in right now. They want to fill that hole. It's painful. Now that they've decided that they want you, what do they want the most? They want you to say yes. Recruit that too, because they've got a pile of open requisitions they're trying to deal with. The average corporate recruiter might be working on 30, 35 open positions at once. The last thing they want is to go back to the beginning of the search process on this and have to do it again. Hiring manager also wants to avoid that. So I tell my clients the most leverage you ever have in this process is between when they offer you the job and when you say yes. One of the biggest mistakes that people make is they say yes immediately. They give up all this leverage that they have right now. So your other question, the first question you asked was, how do you safely navigate this process? I think you have to start with a collaboration. They extend the offer. You ask for a couple of days to consider it, and you're going to come back with questions. if that's okay. And of course, they're going to say, yeah, it's okay if you ask us questions. So you're going to build a list of questions trying to identify where the offer is potentially flexible and where it's firm. You might want offer A, they might have made you the best offer they're ever going to make. It can never get any better. And through this questioning process, you can discover you've already maximized the offer. So you don't want to put a counteroffer out there. Otherwise, the answer is going to be no, you just lost this offer. In other cases, you might discover there's a lot of flexibility. Maybe they're maxed on the salary, but they can adjust in some other areas. So you want to ask a bunch of questions to discover what's flexible and what's fixed, and get some clues as to how much flexibility there is. That way you can put a counteroffer in front of them that is attractive and likely to be acceptable. And I think it's good to bring in your obstacles. So if you have an obstacle that's preventing you from saying yes, you can bring that out and say, I really want to work for you. I love the idea of working for you, but I have this issue and I'm hoping that you can help me to solve the problem. And so you invite them into a collaboration. You described it as a problem-solving exercise, and I agree with that 100%. You invite them to propose solutions that can help you to get over. So let's say you're moving backwards in cash position. They're giving you a big equity stake, and they think that the whole package is a good deal. You can say, here's my issue. Like, it's going to be 3 years before the equity is starting to pay me. In the meantime, I have college tuition for my kids. I've got bills to pay. I've got other things. I feel like I'm moving backwards in cash, and you can see that's the case. What can you do to help me close this gap? That's just one technique. There are many, but I hope that's something that someone can use today to reduce that risk. And it's the risk that drives people away from this.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing that. And that asking those curiosity-based questions always puts everybody's mind at ease as well. So you can get more from that discussion.
Yeah, as long as they feel like you're working toward an acceptance,
Yeah.
they'll engage in that. If they feel like you're just fishing, that's another thing. And you can also invoke a little bit of competition pressure here. I think having competition is very important at this stage. So it's something that you should cultivate throughout your job search.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So how often you said 30 years recruiting, how often were offers rescinded? Do you have a sense or directional sense? How legitimate is this fear?
It's very small, actually, really small. Usually what happens, I'd say the most common situation when an offer is rescinded, and I'm not talking about the person made an outlandish counteroffer. Like, that's different than rescinding the offer, right? Mm-hmm. Just, no, we can't meet your requirement. I guess we're done. Usually what happens is people show up as a different personality in the negotiating process. So this is how I've seen it. Very small number. I would say when I was recruiting full time and I was closing 50 to 100 jobs a year, it would 2 or 3 of them. It's a small risk, but you have to be careful not to become someone that you're not in the negotiation process. Or another thing that people do is they move the goalposts. They'll say, if you can give me X, then I'll say yes. And they give you X and it's, you know what, I've been thinking, I think I want a little more of Y. And the negotiation becomes this never ending process. That annoys people. But I think people believe what I mentioned early on, is that you have to be aggressive. You have to be confrontational. You have to be, it's a power game. It's that game of chicken, whatever it is. They put on the mantle of being aggressive when they're not an aggressive person. And now the hiring manager is calling me saying, John, I'm having second thoughts about this. Tell me more. When I interviewed them, they were so much this. And now that we're talking about money, they are now so much that. I didn't think I was getting that. In fact, I think if they were that, it might actually change my mind about hiring them. So it's really important to be your authentic, high collaboration self in these processes. And if you do it right, you're going to strengthen your brand and your reputation. You're going to be the person that people want to work with, not the person that is going to be difficult to work with.
So here's a controversial question to that, a little bit controversial. So people usually, we know, dislike losing more than they like winning. That's been proven through different research and studies, etc. Like we really dislike losing. So what do you say to someone who's listening to our chat here and saying, it's not worth it? Like even 2% is really high, or even 3 is really high. So I'm just going to forego the $50,000 and go sign up for whatever 180 they're offering.
I will tell you that, first of all, if you believe that, you might be leaving a lot more than 2% on the table. A lot more. I think in my experience, because I started tracking how much my candidates were leaving on the table when I was a recruiter. And I'll tell you why I did. I did that as job security. When you're a recruiter and you're a recruiting specialist like I am, you're really vulnerable to layoff. As soon as the company decides it's time to get smaller, we're not growing anymore, we're going to start shaving off headcount, we're going to freeze hiring. You can imagine how vulnerable recruiters feel in that situation. I guess I'm going to be the first to go. And so I'd been laid off a few times in my career when I started doing this. And what I did is I would set goals to cover my entire annual pay package with monthly negotiation savings. This is how I became like the internal pay negotiation expert training other recruiters, because I started to show how much money I was saving the company just by negotiating with candidates effectively. I wasn't squeezing them down painfully or anything like that. I was just finding a place where everyone could be happy. But it turns out I could have offered 10,000 more and no one would have batted an eye. Literally. So there's a story recently where I was coaching a chief operating officer. And this was a person who was working for a multi-billion-dollar company. He'd just been downsized, or I guess right-sized. A new CEO came in, brought in a new leadership team, and he found himself with a severance plan. And when you're in that position, and I've been in that position before, you feel terrified that your severance is going to run out before you can secure a new income. And so I've been coaching him for a couple of months, and he called me and he said, I've got some good news. I just got an offer. And I think it's good enough. That's the language I'm listening for when I think someone's settling. And they're looking at this fear. Is the risk worth it? So I said, hold on, let's just take a pause. Let me see the offer. And I started showing him where potentially this could be improved and how we would go about positioning for that improvement. We were negotiating with a CEO, and you probably know that CEOs can make any exception that they want to make. If they want to pay somebody up here, they can. If they want to change a bonus structure, they can. If they want to offer 2 weeks more vacation time, they can. They just tell the chief HR officer, make it happen. We're making an exception for this person because they are why? So valuable to the operations. So through this process, we started asking questions. I coached him on what questions to ask. And so he brought those to the CEO and brought me back the answers. And after collaborating and poking, we found out that the CEO was very hungry for this particular client. The board was already aware that he was potentially coming on board. The CEO standed to lose a lot. So he was signaling he was quite flexible in a lot of areas. And would you believe it? We moved his offer up $613,000. That's the biggest success I've had so far in this business. But it was a combination of things. It was salary moving up a little. We moved his bonus target up a little. We got them to waive the proration on the first bonus. That by itself was 95 grand. They increased the initial equity stake. They offered him a 6-figure signing bonus. All because we started this collaborative process and we showed them the path to yes and the obstacles that we had and all that. This candidate could have left a house in most states of the United States on the table. How much money, like the average person is not leaving $600,000 on the table, but a mid-career person might be leaving $20,000 on the table, thinking that 2,000 or 3,000 is what they can get. Maybe there's a lot more there and you have to poke at it. But I think poking at it in a careful, sane, safe way, those techniques exist. That's available to people. They just need to know how to do it. Most people just don't know how.
Very well said. And congratulations on your client. That is a significant win. And I'm sure that's going to be very fulfilling and a great career for that individual.
I keep waiting for him to send me a gift Tesla or something like that.
That's coming any day. It's in the mail. John, in your practice, do you have a split of men versus women on who you coach on negotiation techniques?
Yeah, it's about 50-50. When I first started out, my first 8 clients were men. And I actively wondered, are there any women who want to learn this skill? Or maybe I thought, maybe they are thinking they would rather learn this from a female executive and not from a male executive. I just didn't know why. So when eventually that sorted itself out over time. I think I was just rolling snake eyes 8 times in a row. And now it's about half and half. But when I was writing my book, I did some interesting research. I interviewed about 100 salaried job seekers and I asked them a bunch of questions because I wanted to know how they felt and what they thought so I could put that into my book. And so I asked a question of men and women. I said, who do you think has the advantage in negotiating pay, men or women? And I got different answers from both groups. And then I probed into why you feel that way and what are your personal fears and things like that. So for the men, it was about 30% of men felt that women had the advantage. And I was a little surprised to hear that because everywhere you look and everything you hear about is that men have this advantage in pay negotiation and there's a gender pay gap and all that stuff. And so I asked them why, and I found something I wasn't expecting to find. And that is men, and it's not surprising when you hear it, men can never be women. And men, some men, especially executive men who are in their 50s, maybe they're concerned that if they're competing against a female candidate and that company really wants to add senior female leaders, then they'll be at a disadvantage and the woman then has leverage that she can use. And when I talked to women, I asked them, who do you think has the advantage? And by and large, they said, we think men do. And I said, why do you think that? Why do you feel that? And they said, men are more willing to take risks. Men are more willing, especially to put relationships at risk.
Mm.
And this I thought was an interesting discovery that women felt strongly that one of the things they were afraid of doing was damaging relationships on the way in. And they felt that if they negotiated or they were aggressive or assertive, that maybe they would damage their partnership with their new boss or with somebody in HR or some other important stakeholder. And they wanted to preserve that more than men wanted to preserve that. And so they go into a negotiation thinking that, okay, if I want to succeed in negotiating, I have to pretend to be aggressive maybe when I'm not, and that's going to put my relationships at risk. And that creates another fear. Mm-hmm. I mentioned earlier, there are all these fears that prevent people from negotiating. This is that layer down that I was talking about. That Women were concerned in the research for my book that if they negotiated, they would damage relationships and it was holding them back. It does not have to. You don't have to put relationships at risk.
And to our earlier point about using that kind of problem-solving approach, absolutely, there is no risk of that relationship getting jeopardized.
Exactly. And that's how I can say, like, the salary coach method creates almost zero risk for people. It doesn't eliminate it. There's always some risk, but it reduces it to almost zero.
Yeah, absolutely. One more question on the gender pay gap and the gender approach to negotiation. Recently, there was a study, I believe out of Stanford, that said that women are asking for more, but they're getting denied more often as well versus men. What is your kind of empirical evidence or thought process there? Is during your recruitment time or even your experience now, is there a reason why they're seeing this pattern?
I'm not even sure. I guess I'd have to question whether that pattern exists and where it exists. And the reason why is we have plenty of laws on the book that, let's say you were a female and you suspected that you were undercompensated, you could sue the company. It would be very messy and ugly. And that's why folks like me on the other side are often stepping into those discussions and saying, listen, if you want to offer $10,000 less than the male counterpart here for somebody who is actually more experienced, you're going to hit a significant point of risk to the business. Let's not do that. And so in medium, more mature businesses, right, there should be a stronger HR presence that's making sure that doesn't happen. So there's a lot of reports of that happening. I'd want to know where that's happening. Is it in smaller businesses or something? I just don't know. I don't see it happening all that much. But if it's true, let's just play the game here and say it's true that women are asking and the requests are being denied. It might be the way they think they have to ask. It might go back to an earlier point I made, which is don't be someone you're not.
Yeah. Yeah.
Be your natural, authentic self, which should be high collaboration. If you're highly collaborating and you're looking for a win-win here, you're not making a demand, which is give me an extra $40,000 or I'm not accepting. That's a demand. Instead, approach it from a collaboration and say, have this pause. I've got another company that's coming after me. They're offering me a little bit more money, but I'd really rather work for you. How can you help me close this gap so that I can cancel my interview next week with them and say yes to you right now? Because that's what I want and that's what you want. So you have to bring it back to what do we both want here? And here's a suggested solution. And if they can't meet the requirement, that's cool. You can delay your acceptance and you can interview with that other company. Believe me, they don't want you to do.
Yes.
If you're at the finish line with them, they want nothing more than to announce to the team that you've said yes. They won't announce the terms of the deal.
Yep. Yeah. When you said that about having to get through that approval process and then you get your peers to interview this person and then you have to go back to your peers and say, oh, I didn't get this person. So now I got to get you back to these interviews. Yeah, it is definitely a political shuffle there.
Yeah. I think it's important for people to realize the stakes are high for them too.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're not the only one with a lot of stuff at stake.
Yeah.
So remember that and you'll be much better.
Well, thank you very much.
Hope that helps. Thanks, Dorothy.
John, this has been a very insightful conversation. If people want to work with you or want to get a hold of you, how do they reach you so we can put everything in the show notes?
Sure, that's great. They can email me directly at john@salary.coach. If they just have a question or they want to check out what it might be like to work with me. I also offer the Salary Coach Academy, which is a series of recorded video lessons on how to talk about pay at every single step without putting your offer at risk. That's at salarycoachacademy.com.
Fantastic. And is there a favorite book or movie on negotiation that you would recommend to our audience? And of course, we have your book.
That's really hard for me to answer without pointing to the shelf behind me. I think that's my favorite one. A movie on negotiating. I can't think of anything off the top of my head, Dorothy.
Okay.
Sorry.
If you think of anything, we'll put it in the show notes as well.
Great.
John, thank you so much for sharing your insights. I really had fun talking to you, and I know the audience will get significant nuggets of information and feel inspired to not leave money on the table.
I hope that's the case too. We both want everyone to get what they can get. And,
Absolutely.
This is an easy way. I believe it's the easiest raise you'll ever get is what you negotiate on the way in.
Absolutely. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Dorothy.
There you have it, my friends. Common fears in negotiating and how candidates can overcome them, and how a candidate can gauge a company's flexibility, among other things that we discussed today on this episode. I hope you feel confident, and I hope you feel assured that negotiating your salary is something that a company expects, and you should never fear asking for your worth. Thanks for listening, and bye for now.
There you have it, my friends. As you know, I'm on a mission to close the pay gap. Every podcast episode is designed to give you the tools, techniques, and inspiration so you can bravely advocate for yourself. Thank you for listening, and bye for now.